Show of hands, how many of you were here last year, or at the banquet last year? Most of you, good. So I won't go into the methods and details and stuff that I gave you last year. I'll go from where I left off. So I've had 1.5 field seasons since then, and lots of things have changed. I've added stuff, taken away stuff, and I've added a whole bunch of pictures, so hopefully I'll hold your attention with those at least.
Still experimenting.
Okay.
Colton, this doesn't work out.
Come on now. No, all right. Okay. You push it.
Is it here? Okay.
All right. So I'm from St. Joseph, Missouri. I got my bachelor's in wildlife biology at Missouri State, where I worked in a freshwater mussel lab. And what drew me to a freshwater mussel lab? Well, the professor grew butterflies on the side. So that got me interested, and then I got to work with endangered species. And I gave you guys the fun story about how I got involved with this foundation. When I started working at Roaring River, Tim and Shane got me very interested. They said, how'd you like to do bugs with the trees? It's like, well, that's cool. And they're like, you can ride the bucket truck. It's like, that's cool. And these nuts taste really good. All right, sign me up. So I was in, my study site is right there in Berry, the southwest corner of Missouri in Berry County. It's less than 5 miles from Roaring River State Park. And it's less than a mile from the World Champion tree. So the whole field site is right here on this map. And as you can see, all this cleared off land is, the landowner used a bulldozer. And one of his neighbors, the guy that had the tree that was chopped down by the power company, he said, no, stop, there's Chinquapins out there. And so after that, he bulldozed everything but the Chinquapins. So it makes it very convenient to me to be able to just drive up to these trees. Except for he didn't mow the last 2 years, and it's blackberries this high. So I have to go in there with a manual weed whacker and clean out paths on all these trees. Right, I could still drive. A lot of these trees that you'll see, the dots are Chinquapin. And so we found 5 new trees this year out there, and one of them a little more than 10 inches in diameter. So every year we go out there, we find more, and we've never searched any of the wooded area. We only search right at the edge of these clearings. So, I mean, the new state champion could be in there somewhere. I just haven't looked. It's about 100 acres. No, no. To give you a little bit of introduction, here's the typical tree in my field site. And as you can tell, these taller branches are dead white branches, and then all these are root color sprouts. But many of the trees in this plot still reproduce on their own. They bear seeds, they have an incredible nut crop. 2 years ago, Shane and I filled up a truck bed full of burrs from this one site. And that's where some of your seed came from that year. And if you ate the stuff that chef guy brought last year, that was from this site. And then this right here is our tallest tree and the healthiest tree at the plot. We don't see any blight on this tree, and it's odd because it's in the bottom of a ditch, and there are ferns growing right next to it. And you'll ask people in the room, they're not supposed to grow there. Some of them are on very steep rock slopes, and that's it. So it's pretty diverse. The goals of my research last year were to determine if the Ozark Chinquapin is partially insect pollinated. So I know some of you think, like, I'm seeing which insects are the best pollinators. Well, that was where Steve and I wanted to go with first. When I dove into the literature, all the literature said it was wind pollinated. But like Shane said, when you're out there around those trees, there's so many bugs that it can't only be wind. And so that's where we went from there. And I also conducted a pollinator survey, and our predictions were that the seed set for both wind and insect pollination will be superior to that of strictly wind pollination, and that no selfing work would occur. The tree should be self-sterile. So there's arguments on both sides of whether it's insect or wind pollinated. And I mean, the list goes on and on. I'll give you the 4 easiest to look at. So for wind, the male flowers produce large quantities of pollen, which is great. You know, it's easy. It's on the very tips of the branches. It can get blown off, and it's very small and lightweight. It's only about 13 microns each grain of pollen. And then the catkins for the insect side of the argument, they smell a lot. Lots of these guys I mentioned. And they actually do produce a nectar. So we'll get into that further. And the pollen is sticky, which would help it get stuck to insects as they fly around to the next tree. For those of you that might not have seen Chinquapin flowers close up, Shane and I actually looked at some of those outside on the Allegheny that were still receptive today. So this is the female catkin right here, and those are, that part of the flower is how we know if it's receptive or not. And then these are the male parts of the flowers, and that's where all the pollen is produced. So seeds are produced here, pollen is produced here. This is actually a picture from Shane and I's pollination on the champion tree. And we just used paper sandwich bags like you get at Walmart. And we labeled them, put duct tape and a zip tie, which lasts the whole year. That's great. And we used the zip ties to color coordinate the crosses that year. And then I used it to determine which treatment we used. So I had 3 treatments. Regular paper bag, which is to exclude wind and insects. So no seed should be produced with that treatment. The mesh bags were used to allow the pollen into the flowers and exclude the insects. So allow wind, exclude insects. And then the final one was no bag, which insects and wind both have free access to the flowers. And we used 5 trees with 10 total of each treatment. So we put 30 bags, or 30 treatments on the tips of branches on these trees. So they had to be large to be able to have 30 treatments on them. And that only gave us 5 trees. Well, that last year, one of those trees died because of the blight. And so there went 20% of my research for the whole year. And lots of other ones had abortions. Sometimes the trees will just abort burrs completely. So I can't evaluate the seed set if there's no nut. And then the paper bags, it rained a ton at the beginning of the season, and then it never rained again the rest of the year. And it destroyed all those paper bags. And so I was hoping that no pollen would get inside those paper bags. But some did. I mean, I'd go out there the next day and put new bags on, but it didn't keep them sterile like I wanted them to. So after the tree was done flowering, we removed the bags to allow, all of nature to take its course. Wanted the plant to be stressed as little as possible because all these trees I'm using are blighted. And we left the zip ties on there to know which bag that each branch had. We applied special pollination bags near burr split because that is when the Chinquapin weevil, or the chestnut weevil, attacks, is right when the burrs split open, and they have free access to that nut. And I mean, I don't want worms in my nuts, so it's important that I protected those so that I could evaluate seed set, so that the meat will not get eaten by something, or squirrels or whatever. And then we collected the seeds after they were ready. So here's a picture of some of the seeds we collected that year. I mean, some of you have seen that, but outside of this room, I bet there's very few people that have seen that many Chinquapins. So we evaluated seed set by looking at the number of filled seeds over the total number of seeds. So we'd open up a burr. If there was a nut inside that had nut meat in it, we considered that that was pollinated. If we opened it up and there was just a little bitty shell and no nut meat, then it was not pollinated. And that's how we evaluated pollination. And that was to answer our question if insect and wind pollination is superior. So here are our preliminary data. And as you can see, pretty obvious, right? So this was the control, which should have been a 0. But since my bags filled, we did get a few seeds. And then the wind only was about a little more, 6 or 7% seed set. And that's with my screen bags. And then insect and wind, we got about 32% seed set, which, you know, some people have said, well, doesn't the bag prevent the pollen from getting to the flowers? A little bit. It's, the papers that I've read said that 80% of pollen can still pass through that 1 millimeter mesh. And as you can see, that difference is so great that that's irrelevant. Well, we'll get into that. I also did a pollinator survey. We put blue vein traps out on the property. And this was not necessarily Chinquapin insect pollinators. And some individuals from that collection are over there in a wooden box if you guys would like to take a look. And use RV antifreeze at the bottom of the traps. The insect would fly towards the blue and yellow because of the color. And then they'd fall into the traps and die in the antifreeze. And that would preserve them until I get back. So those were strained and cleaned with ethanol and sorted and pinned. And at least one of each species is in that box over there. And that's just so we can tell what pollinators were present on the property. And I ID'd several of them, or a whole bunch of those last year, and that helped me this season. So like I said, for 2016, our goals changed a little bit. Here's a picture of the study site, and there are 1, 2, 3 fairly large Chinquapins in the picture. And, same first goal is the Chinquapin insect or wind pollinated. I went to a conference last year and somebody said, are the insects, the catkins are separate, male and female, do the insects ever touch the female flower? I was like, I have no clue. And if they're not touching the female flowers, then they're not pollinating it. If they only go to the male catkins every time and they don't touch the female flowers, then there's no way they could drop pollen on them. So it's like, man, I would have never thought of that. You know, I'm glad somebody brought it up. So we added this part of the study this year. And so I would sit out there at hours on it for a time and watch these flowers and see what the insects did. And then try to quantify their behavior.
Were they on the female?
Spoilers! That's the punchline. So, I also collected insects directly off the flowers this year and tried to photograph as many as possible. There was one issue with that. They sent me out with a real camera that you actually have to focus. And, you know, being a kid from the digital age, I'd only ever used point and shoot that had a macro setting. You know, it's really easy. You just take a picture and it's perfect. Well, my pictures came out blurry, so I'll give you the best of what I collected. So instead of using white paper bags, I used brown pollination bags. And if you went outside, I think they actually had some of the corn plants out there. Probably the same brand. It's one major company. Steve warned me that these might kill the ends of the branches. So I called around to lots of other companies and they said, well, maybe it's just because of, you know, how hot it is at those field sites. So I risked it. I used these paper bags. Luckily, they did not inkill the branches. Everything was fine on the inside, and they stood up to the weather fantastic. I mean, thunderstorms came through, wind, you know, branches scratching on these wet bags, and they all stayed intact. And then we used the same mesh bags and no bag. This year, we upped it to as many trees as possible at the field site. So I found 45 trees, 5 other good ones that we found them too late. They had already started to set seed. But we used 13 trees, and each of them only received 3 of each tree. So that way I could use really small root collar sprouts because I only needed 9 branches with catkins. So, getting into the behavioral stuff of the insects, Shane can attest, most of the insects up there are actually flies, which is interesting. And if you smell the flowers, you know, they're not the sweetest smelling flowers, but they're definitely not stinky. So it's interesting that there are so many flies up there. I took written notes, photographs, and I hand collected.